Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, it is time to have a look at the very weird, very cheap deck with which Karl Peters went and won in Lille this past weekend over in France. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very fun deck. It's a very cheap deck. And it won a regional championship. And Karl himself has basically said, look, I didn't have any Tapu Lele GX, so I had to do what I could without it. And essentially, this was the best deck that I could make without using Tapu Lele GX. And you know what? There's several reasons I love this deck. First of all, it's cheap. Secondly, he didn't want to use Tapu Lele GX, but he did use the other Tapu Lele. And thirdly, and I cannot explain to you how excited this makes me, it actually uses Survivor. I've been saying ever since this came out that it's got so much potential and it's so cool and it should be good and it should see play, and it's never good and it never sees play. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's changed. Honestly. Ooh. It's so good. So, let's have a look, shall we? And it all starts off with Tapu Koko. Tapu Koko's got Flying Flip, double colorless energy, 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. It's a Pokemon that's seen a huge amount of play in a huge amount of decks ever since it was released as two different promo cards. But we also see Latios here, which, as a lot of you, most of you will probably know by now, is a very similar Pokemon. Except for a double colorless energy, instead of doing 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon, it will do 30 damage to one and 30 damage to another. 30 to the active, 30 to one of the bench. And this really comes down to where you are at the moment. Now, obviously, you're hitting different weaknesses here. So it may well be that if you're up against something like a Buzzwole, you do want to go with the Psychic type, because then you're not weak and you're hitting for weakness rather than being weak. That sounds pretty good. But a lot of the time, if you're against a deck which has just got loads of 60 HP Pokemon, think something like Zorua. If you hit a Zorua when it's on the bench for 30, you're saying to your opponent, either you evolve that next turn, and then you got a Zoroark with damage on, or I will get a cheeky prize. Tapu Koko is really good for just generally spreading damage around, especially if your opponent's got a full bench. I mean, if your opponent has got 3 or fewer Pokemon, you're probably better off with Latios anyway. But if you're going after the 60 HP Pokemon, etc., Latios is better. And once you spread a bunch of damage around, in comes Tapu Lele to move the damage. And we've seen Tapu Lele in a couple of decks recently. We've seen it in a couple of decks we're looking at. And for 2 energy, and here we're clearly playing counter energy, you essentially wait till you're down on prizes, and then you attach a counter energy and you get the chance to just rearrange all of the damage on your opponent's side of the field. It's very, very good, ladies and gentlemen. It's very good. And the thing is, your opponent can go, ha ha ha, I'm not taking a prize to let you have counter energy. I'm going to set up nicely without turning on counter energy. Brilliant, because you're spreading with Tapu Koko and Latios the entire time. Yeah. So you just get to sit there and spread, or they take a KO, and then you've got access to Tapu Lele. And what you do here is you spread damage around to take KOs, or to put stuff into KO range, or to group the damage onto the Pokemon you most want to KO. This is a difficult deck to play initially, because first you need to make that decision between Tapu Koko and Latios, and then you've got to make that decision as to where you put the damage with Tapu Lele. Now, we've discussed in a couple of decks lately as to what to do in terms of playing the Fairy Lele or playing the Psychic Lele, and there are a couple different options that you've got here. Generally speaking, the Fairy Tapu Lele is good because it hits weakness against stuff like Rayquaza, because there is a general attack here that just does more damage for as much energy as on your opponent's Pokemon. But the Psychic one tends to be better because you're hitting weakness against Buzzwole, and because you can then use Mysterious Treasure to go and search it out as an alternative to an Ultra Ball, because you're only discarding one card from your hand. However, we see here that we're not playing Mysterious Treasure, so it doesn't really matter so much. It's not so important. One of each here just so you can take advantage of the weaknesses. Now, we do see a couple of other Pokemon here. We see an Oranguru, just so that you can draw until you got 3 cards in hand. And we see a Mimikyu, which is here for Copycat. Mimikyu is one of these that's got a million different uses, but essentially here, we're waiting for your opponent to use an attack which can KO itself. So if you're against something like a Buzzwole, and they use Sledgehammer for 1 energy, in comes Mimikyu, and if they've got 4 prizes remaining, you get an easy 1-hit KO. Or if they use Swing Around, you get an easy 1-hit KO. There's plenty of Pokemon, I mean, something like Tapu Bulu, this is really good against, and I know it's not seeing a huge amount of play right now, but this can KO that quite nicely. I'm a big fan of this. It's got a million different uses depending on the deck, and you are hitting a good weakness. And then we get back to these 2 copies of Seviper. Seviper, for those of you that have forgotten, has an ability whereby you put 1 more damage counter on poisoned Pokemon between turns. Now, firstly, this is awesome. Secondly, you might be thinking, well, hang on a second here. None of these Pokemon have attacks that poison. Unless Mimikyu is copying an attack that poisons, why would you possibly need this? And the answer, very simply, is you're playing Poison Barb. You're playing a full set of 4 Poison Barb, another card, which has seen almost no play. And essentially, if you damage a Pokemon with Poison Barb attached, you are poisoned, you take 1 damage between turns, but with 2 Seviper out, you take 3 damage between turns. Yeah, it's Verbank City Gym and Hypnotoxic Laser all over again. And decks lately are playing fewer Field Blower, especially since Garbodor rotated out, so you don't need to turn off its ability by getting rid of its tool, and that means that people like Karl have gone, hang on a second, Poison Barb is really good, it's just annoying because the vast majority of people can get rid of it using a Field Blower. Oh no, wait, people have stopped using Field Blower. That's where I come in. Now, in terms of energy here, we see 4 double colorless, obviously, because that's what your spreaders are using. We see 4 counter energy, obviously, because that's where you need for your Tapu Lele and other Pokemon, Mimikyu, etc. And there's 1 rainbow energy here, because it's quite nice to be able to use a Tapu Lele, Mimikyu, etc. when you're not behind on prizes, so it's nice to have this. Of course, this means you are 100% reliant on special energy. Something like a Xurkitree GX, you can only KO with poison, yowza, but apparently it's not that big of an issue, and we don't have special charge anymore to recover these. But evidently, people are not playing enough Special Energy Hate. And like I've said, when people don't play Special Energy Hate, decks like this that rely on Special Energy come to the fore. In terms of trainers, there are a few weird things that we see here. We see 4 copies of Nest Ball. This is an entirely basic deck. Nest Ball is phenomenal in terms of just being able to search out all of your basics and get them when you need them. You're not even playing any Ultra Ball here because you don't need them, because Nest Ball gets all of your Pokemon. We see 4 copies of Energy Lotto. You're playing Special Energy. You need to be able to search them. Energy Lotto's the best one we've got. We see 4 copies of Acrobike. This is a deck that needs to get its stuff. You need your Poison Barb on the right turn. You need to get your double colorless energy to be attacking turn 1. That's where stuff like Acrobike comes in. But we also see 4 copies of Pokénav. Pokénav! Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal a Pokemon or energy card you find there and put it into your hand. Like I've said, this is a deck which is going to constantly be adapting, constantly changing its strategy. Some games you need Latios, some games you need Tapu Koko, some games you need a Tapu Lele and a counter energy this turn. And this is a kind of card that helps you search it out. We obviously see 4 copies of Poison Barb, as we've talked about. And then we see 4 copies of Shrine of Punishment. And these decks that we have at the moment, they can build up damage quickly. You don't have any big hitters in this deck. Unless you can catch them with a Mimikyu copycat, there is no big hitter in this deck. But between your spreading and your poison and your Shrine of Punishment, there will be a lot of damage going onto the deck very, very quickly. And even the supporter line here is a little bit weird. Yes, fine, we see 4 Cynthia, that's the best draw card we've got at the moment. That makes perfect sense. But then we see 4 copies of Professor Kukui. Professor Kukui isn't some niche card that never sees play. But 4 copies of it? That's a lot, ladies and gentlemen. But if you can search out your energy with stuff like PokéNav or Energy Lotto, you need to get set up, and that's difficult. But once you're set up here, you're talking basic Pokemon single energy, and that's where you can afford to use stuff like Professor Kukui. Again, you're not doing much damage generally, this gives you extra damage. And then we see 2 copies of Underground Expedition. And again, this just goes back to my previous point of needing to get all of your stuff now. This lets you look at the bottom 4 cards of your deck and put 2 of them into your hand. And the reason this is good is we don't have a general draw 4 card. The closest we've got is Howl that lets you draw 3, or something like Sophocles that lets you draw 4, but there's a big downside. Here, this lets you choose from 4 cards on the bottom of your deck. You need your special energy on the right turn, and this is a very good card for actually helping you get it. And the fact that we see 4 Energy Lotto, and we see 4 PokéNav, and we see 2 of these, really does show how far this deck is going with, I need my Poison Barb now. I need my special energy now. I love it. And then there's 1 copy of Guzma to bring up bench Pokemon, and there's 2 copies of Escape Rope, which either acts as a switch for yourself, or forces your opponent to switch their active, and if they don't have a good one on the bench, that could be kind of fun. I adore this deck. It's such a weird deck list. It's so weird, but it works. It doesn't take big KOs, but it works. I adore it. But I want to know what you think about it, ladies and gentlemen. So do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. But please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays for some more Wassy action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.